And we are back with episode 2 of the top 70 albums of the 70s, counting down number 60 to 51 in this episode. My good friend Nathaniel Ahart here with me. And man, this has been a blast, guys. You guys really outdid yourselves on these votes. It just keeps getting better and better as we go. And yeah, I'm psyched for this one, man.
Yeah, me too. Definitely a lot of interesting choices on this episode. Some we may agree on, some we may not. But I guess we'll have to see, huh?
Yeah, let's get right to it. Let's not waste any time. At number 60,
Exodus by Bob Marley in the Wailers. I don't know what this is doing at number 60. This is way too. Have you guys not heard this album?
So good.
I mean, really, this album is unbelievable and one of the best, absolute best studio albums from Bob Marley and the Wailers, which I think says a lot because they have so many phenomenal records. But this one is easily, I think, their most accessible outside of the greatest hits, obviously. And even from the first track, Natural Mystic is just such a wonderful way to kick off this album. It has a really great catchy. There's a natural mystic floating through the air, so it's like that can tell you right there. It's pretty memorable. But the first side, because a lot of people accuse this album of being maybe a little too pop centric. I definitely still think that there's a lot of layers and social critiques on this, just maybe not as much as something like Catch a Fire, but it's certainly there even on songs like Guiltiness and The Heathen. But my goodness, the B-side of this album is probably the greatest B-side to any Bob Marley and the Wailers record. I mean, just with Jammin', Waiting in Vain, which is my favorite song on here. It's just one of his most sensual love ballads in their entire catalog. Don't turn your lights down, or turn your lights down low. And then, of course, ending this thing out with Three Little Birds in that mashup of One Love, People Get Ready, that early Wailers song, which does not sound good, the original recording of it. Sorry, guys. And of course, the Impression song written by Curtis Mayfield really created one of their most iconic hits and really one of the greatest sentiments. And of course, the title track is amazing too. I mean,
this did you mention like, Jammin' too? That's on there.
I mentioned that.
Yeah, okay.
Song on the second side, but yeah, I mean, all of these. I mean, there's not a weak song on this entire album. I just can't believe that it's this low. This is like one of the most definitive reggae albums of all time, and it's just I'm glad to see the Wailers on this list. But this is, come on, guys, this is an absolute icon. This should be in like the top 30, I think.
It almost comes off like a greatest hits album. And I think, people probably take it for granted because, like right behind me on my wall, I've got Legend, and people just naturally go to that for all the hits. But yeah, as a studio album, man, this is just nonstop greatness. Three Little Birds is probably my favorite, just because like you can't help but feel happy when you listen to that song. It's
every little thing is gonna be all right.
Don't worry about a thing. Yeah, man. It's just, and yeah, Waiting in Vain is so good. I don't want to wait in vain for your love. So awesome, man.
And it has like the most seductive grooves on any record. Of course, with the Barrett brothers really holding down that rhythm section like no other. Right. I mean, just Carlton Barrett on the drum. I mean, he is the definitive reggae drummer. I think one of the most definitive drummers of all, or I'm thinking of whatever, one of the brothers. I mean, he's just so incredible on that kit, man. And there's nothing like it. And there's nothing like the Wailers. And obviously Bob Marley, if you guys know, he is one of my favorite musicians of all time, and this is one of my favorite bands of all time. So glad to see him here, but
should be higher for sure. Yeah. But great pick, guys. So now at number 59, Band of Gypsys by Jimi Hendrix and the Band of Gypsys. As you can tell, one of my favorite albums of all time. It's on my wall of perfect albums. It is a 10 out of 10. And just from the opening track alone, who knows? It's just one of the coolest openings to any live album of all time. Like this guy saying, "Hey, and now the band of gypsies," and he's doing this little riff, playing it lightly, and then all of a sudden the distortion kicks in, and it's one of the coolest and like funkiest riffs ever. And Buddy Miles and Billy Cox, maybe they're not quite the Jimi Hendrix Experience, but they're a whole other thing, man. It's like, and funk is really an element throughout this album of these original songs. Of course, one of them was Buddy Miles' song Changes, but all these new songs, it always makes me sad to think that like these could have been on a studio album eventually, and Hendrix of course passed too soon. But oh my god, just for Who Knows and Machine Gun, just incredible. That song alone, that he's making his freaking guitar sound like guns and bombs exploding. It's nuts, man. And still melodic, and a great song with a powerful message. And all the songs here are about love, power to love, message of love. It's such an extremely well performed. I mean, Hendrix was on a whole other level. Like nobody can bend the notes like him. It was nuts. And a shout out to my Uncle Bob, who was actually at this concert on New Year's Eve 1969 going into 1970. Of course, they played a lot of Hendrix's other hits, but on this album they just condensed it to these 6 songs that I think are just all magical. And yeah, should be, just like Bob Marley, so much higher on this list, in my opinion.
Well, John, I don't think this is a perfect album, and I listened to it again. It wouldn't have made my 70s list, but I mean, this is a great record. I love this album, and
as long as you say it's great, that's
yeah.
all
No, I mean, unquestionably, I think the thing about it for me, there's definitely some musical stuff where I was listening to it and I'm like, okay, this isn't quite perfect. Like I'm not a huge fan of that scat thing, that Buddy Miles does.
Yeah. Actually, that took a long time to grow on me. I'll tell you the truth, man. I used to have this on cassette back in the day, and I would always fast forward that part because I thought it was ridiculous. But through the years, it's grown onto me where now I think it's endearing, and like I can't imagine the song without it. But
well, it's certainly the performance of it is endearing, but it doesn't mean I like to listen to that specific part of the song. But when Hendrix goes on that wah wah stuff, I mean, it's just incredible. And dude, just one of the like meanest bass grooves I've ever heard in my life. Just absolutely sick. And then of course Machine Gun is amazing, just that with Hendrix like muting the guitar, attacking it, and then Buddy Miles wailing on the drums. It's just crazy, man. And just the fact it goes on for 12 minutes, but it's so explorative and just so emotive. Obviously, it's really music painting, creating these images with his, like he did with the national anthem at Woodstock. But believe it or not, my favorite song on here is actually Changes.
Okay. It's a great song.
I just think, yeah, man, just the live interaction, and it just, yet again, one of the meanest riffs I've ever heard, especially from Hendrix playing guitar. This album really, more than anything, shows Hendrix at his most virtuistic as a guitarist, and I think that's why you listen to it. But dude, just when the hand claps come in and everybody's getting into it, I mean, it is
at the end, and they even give a nod to Sly and the Family Stone doing that little riff from Sing a Simple Song going into the last track. So it shows like he was going that direction too. So it would have been so cool to see like where Hendrix went next,
right?
But,
yeah, man. I mean, that's the thing. I think the one thing about this album for me too, like I compare it to the studio albums, and you can tell like there's certainly a rawness to it, that it feels a little unpolished, and like the songs aren't as memorable as I think a lot of the Experience stuff is. So I can, but then again, I mean, comparing that to that, I mean, this is Hendrix we're talking about, so regardless, every single release he came out with in his life, because I was kind of arguing in my head, do I love this album or do I not? But
Yeah.
I really, I think I do. Yet again, it wouldn't have made my list, but this is a great choice, and I understand the appeal, but I certainly don't think it's his best record or anything.
Well, this is like, again, this is how good the 70s were, man. I
Right.
mean, of course, this is kind of on the cusp, 69, 70, but this is my favorite live album of all time. So, and it's only at number 59.
Well,
So
that's the
crazy.
thing, man, because it's like I think that there are better live albums from the 70s that are a little bit more clean and well performed. Maybe we'll get to some of them. We'll
I
see.
think we will,
But yeah, this is a great choice, undeniably so.
yeah, great choice, guys. So now at number 58. Tumbleweed Connection by Sir Elton John. This is another great album from the year 1970. Another one that is on my wall of perfect albums. I'm so glad this made the list. And another one that obviously I think should be higher. But this is my favorite Elton John album. And a lot of people would argue that, I'm sure, because he's had so many great ones from the 70s. But I just love what he did here so much, like as an artistic statement, just going almost full-blown country western, but it's really, to me, it's more Americana, if you had to call it a genre. And it's him and Bernie Taupin decided to do like their take on what the band was doing. And I feel like they exceeded what the band did, not just in songwriting, but in the music, the production value, the stuff that Paul Buckmaster adds, to the equation with strings, like the beauty of songs like Come Down in Time, where you've got this like oboe solo on there. It's beautiful. Like you can picture like a sunset when you're listening to it. And then you've got the opening track, which is a great rocker, Ballad of a Well-Known Gun. You've got Country Comfort, which is like full-blown country. My Father's Gun is like such an epic song that just has like this mantra that keeps building and building with these background vocalists and the strings and horns and like the whole thing. And then towards the end of the album, you got songs like Talking Old Soldiers with Elton John, like doing this amazing, of course, Bernie wrote the lyrics, but the storytelling of like, you really feel like you're in a bar with this old soldier telling his story. And I don't think Elton's voice has ever been stronger on that track. It's like unbelievable. So yeah, I absolutely love this thing. And so I know it's not your favorite Elton album, but you got to respect it, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, I do agree with you about the bit you were saying about the band. I definitely think they did this style of Americana better. I personally, I don't think they did it better than the Grateful Dead, but even so, I mean, this is a standout in Elton John's discography for sure. It's not my favorite. I definitely think that there's a few stronger records, some we may or may not get into later down the list.
Yes.
But this album, I mean, just from the opening track, You Set Alone is an absolute classic song. With such a great Elton John hook, but the storytelling here is really the standout. I don't think there's any really weak tracks on here. Maybe some I'm not necessarily drawn towards, or some that I feel a little drawn out. I don't remember if I Love My Father's Gun, but I feel like that might have been the one that went on a little bit for me. But side two, especially, I mean, Love Song is really a great cover. And just the chord progression on it is just absolutely ethereal. And of course, I mean, probably the biggest hit from this album, Amarina, is just an absolute. That was like the one Elton John song I heard on this. I was like, oh, I've heard the song before.
Of course, yeah.
Really, really great.
And it was in Dog Day Afternoon also in the opening.
It was in Dog Day Afternoon.
Yeah.
Oh man, I forgot about that. Maybe that's where I heard it.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, an absolute classic in Elton's catalog. But I agree with what you're saying about Talking Old Soldiers. I mean, just masterful storytelling and really just drawn into this saloon-esque environment with the pianos and everything. And it's really just one of those songs that Elton wraps you in with Bernie's lyrics and his music. And it's just unbelievable accomplishment in storytelling. And yeah, just this is a really, I mean, I don't quite love it, but this is a really strong record. So I'm okay with it being this low, personally.
Sure. But yeah, I think one of the other things for me that I was thinking as you were talking there is like, I'm not even that big a fan of country music in general. So for me to like really love this and get, and I think one of the things about it that really connected me to it is like it has such an earthy vibe to it. Like,
Yeah,
especially love song that you mentioned, like you hear this foot tapping and like it just feels very organic. And I just feel like they knocked it out of the park. And it's incredible to think this is the second album he released in the same year, his debut album. And then of course in 71, he went right behind this with Madman Across the Water. So it was
wow.
just like one after another, you know, prolific doesn't even cover it with these guys. Just
Yeah,
incredible.
I mean his catalog was uh maybe not. I think their artists had a stronger catalog, but his records were so consistent. I mean, there's
Mhm.
not one even like less than really solid record from that era.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think this is one that kind of stands a little bit above the rest for sure. So
absolutely.
there's a couple
Cool.
more I like more.
Yeah, we'll get to those. So now at number 57, Abraxas by Santana. He made the list again. He was on with the 60s with the debut album. Now he's here with the follow-up. And yeah, no, it's another classic. I mean, just for the two big hits that everybody knows, Black Magic Woman and Oye Como Va, which of course uh Carlos is not known for being a big songwriter. Both of those were covers, but I think the best versions of those songs. The Black Magic Woman was a Fleetwood Mac song. He made it totally his own. And then Oye Como Va was Tito Puentes. And I mean, the Santana version is just absolutely classic. The percussion, the guitar riffs are so strong, and you just want to like dance and put your teeth out to it. Like, yeah, when you're listening to it, gotta love it. And then Samba Pati, I think, is such a beautiful instrumental, and that is something that you know Santana came up with. Of course, there's some other really cool instrumentals on here, but yeah, overall, you know, it's a little hit or miss, but I think it does deserve to be on the list. Obviously, not higher than the three we've already mentioned on this episode. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that first state or that last statement there, but
Hmm.
it's the first time I'm going to say it on this list. This album's overrated. I get its place, especially in Latin rock
Hmm.
music. I mean, this is really one of the progenitors, but I don't think it's better than the debut, which I also said wasn't my favorite for the '60s list.
Mm.
I don't, this is someone's gonna go off on me about this, but I don't even quite love Black Magic Woman. I just it's not my favorite song. I really like it. I get why everybody enjoys it, but to me, obviously, the stand as Oye Como Va. And just
Mhm.
the rhythm section on it, just that Latin rhythm section is just so infectious.
Yeah,
But there isn't really much in the way of lyrics on this thing. I'm a big lyrics guy. And maybe that was another reason why Band of Gypsies ranks a little lower for me as well,
sure.
compared to the other Hendrix stuff. But but really, my other favorite track on here is Incident at Neshaber. I
Mm.
think is by far the most explorative instrumental on the whole thing. It reminded me of something that could have been on the Dark Side of the Moon, even
Right.
any like those great prog records that Pink Floyd made. I think it's almost on par with it. But a lot of the stuff, it just feels kind of inconsequential to me. Like I appreciate the musical integrity of it all, and I respect what it means influence wise, but I just don't think it's the greatest record. Plus, I think their debut is a little bit stronger, if you ask me.
You're just not an American, man. I don't know.
Well, I don't know about that. I wouldn't say
I
I'm
don't,
necessarily a jingoist though. So.
I don't know what I'm talking about. But no, no, you're not a Mexican American. That's what it is.
Well,
But
that is true. That is
yeah,
true.
yeah. But no, man. I get it. I mean, there's definitely some songs on here that are not quite up to par with the hits. And Black Magic Woman, I could see how some people wouldn't be as into it. It has almost like a lounge lizard kind of feel to it on the verses, that kind of thing. But his guitar playing, man,
Oh
is really
yeah.
what does it for me. Just, same with Hendrix. I'm able to overlook some of the other things because it's just so historically great. And yeah, so another great pick, guys. So now at number 56. Metal by Pink Floyd, the first and probably not the last Pink
Certainly
Floyd
not.
album on the list. And yeah, this is a great one, guys. This was not exactly my entry point into Pink Floyd. I want to say it was Dark Side of the Moon, probably,
Yeah.
but I think I listened to this shortly after from a friend recommending it, and I was like, oh cool, I see the progression, because it was kind of like Echoes, which takes up the entirety of side B of this album, was kind of the template for Dark Side, both in sound and their writing process, as far as writing about things that were a little more, I guess, weighty, and they're writing about empathy and things that really mattered. And so just for that 23-minute song alone, which is an epic masterpiece. I absolutely love this album. Also, the opening track, One of These Days, is really cool, especially that like rotating bass riff that really just propels the song. And of course, Nick Mason with the distorted "One of these days I will cut you to little pieces," or whatever he says. It's ridiculous. And then there's only 6 songs on the record, but Fearless is another standout, really cool acoustic riff, and some beautiful singing by David Gilmour. This feels like the first Pink Floyd album, with Gilmour, where they were really starting to figure it all out, and for that reason, I'm so happy it made the list.
Yeah, this was definitely one that paved the way, and I think it's great that you mentioned the word weighty, because I feel like that's what separates Pink Floyd from all the pretentious mysticism that a lot of prog band, well, almost every single prog band fell into, except Floyd.
Yeah.
And this was really the start of it. Obviously, Echoes is amazing. I haven't listened to this album in a couple of years, and I'm kicking myself because my schedule's just ass. So I'm just trying to figure out everything that's going on right now, and I didn't get it. Thank you. I didn't have time to squeeze this one in again, but yeah, I especially I do think I remember liking Saint Tropez a lot, if I'm not mistaken.
That's a fun song too.
Yeah, and Seamus was really interesting too, with like the dog or whatever. I don't know if I love
howling. Yeah.
Yeah, it's you could see where they were going with the experimental stuff. Obviously, it wasn't a full-fledged concept album yet, but especially after the last few albums like Adam Mother's Heart, which I just think is pretentious nonsense. I feel like this is really where they were finding their footing. And obviously Gilmour as a guitarist just grew exponentially, and Waters as a lyricist, obviously just incredible. But yeah, I'm definitely going to be revisiting this one soon. But really, this was the one that marked all the great things to come, like right after this.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. And Echoes, again, like I can't say enough how awesome that song is. Like, especially if you watch the Live at Pompeii concert, which really makes it super epic, them out there. But also, a lot of people may not recognize this, but I feel like the Phantom of the Opera, if you're familiar with that, dun, 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 I feel like it totally rips off Gilmour's riff, which this album did precede that musical, actually. So I may be wrong on that. Somebody can correct me, but
yes, before we accuse Andrew Lloyd Webber of plagiarism.
Yes, I'm accusing him, so I'm going on the record. But I think David Gilmour's riff is just brilliant on that part, and then it goes into a whole funk thing, and then into like this spacey weird part that I sometimes tend to skip. But then when it comes back in toward the end, man, and just oh my God, it's just beautiful. And then when Richard Wright and Gilmour are echoing each other on the riffs at the end, it's just magical. So
And
Great
dude,
choice.
just think they haven't even made Animals yet.
I know, right?
So it's like,
Yeah.
whoa.
Yeah, we're gonna see some more Pink Floyd on the list
Definitely.
for sure. So now at number 55,
Bat Out of Hell by Meatloaf. Yeah, this is a really good album, but I'm not quite sure why it's above Bill Withers or Jimi Hendrix or Lou Reed or Bob Marley
yeah, I'm
or
I'm
most
with
of
you,
the
man.
things. I'm okay with it being above Santana, but I mean, this album to me, the reason why I get it's one of the best selling albums of all time, and obviously, rest in peace to Meatloaf because he just died. But
Really cool dude and good actor, by the way.
yeah,
Yeah,
Bob and his bitch tits, I guess.
yeah. Yeah.
But
His
no,
name is Robert Paulson. Yeah.
Robert Paulson. Okay. But no, the title track to me is it's just a rip off Springsteen song, and it just it
Yeah.
sounds like Born to Run, but like way worse. And I don't get the appeal of it. But man, I think the best songs on here are just fantastic, especially 2 out of 3 Ain't Bad is just such a
Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful ballad. And of course, I mean, how can you not love Paradise by the Dashboard Light? Was just
Of
so
course.
ridiculous, but in like the best way possible. I
Yeah.
mean, this is obviously not, it wasn't necessarily critically acclaimed at the time, but it certainly has it's garnered a following nowadays. And musically, I think that there's, all revved up and no place to go. There's some good songs on here.
Oh yeah.
I just think it's really, really inconsistent. It's just a rip off of Springsteen. So, I would rather put on another Springsteen album on here as opposed to having
Yeah.
this. But
And plus there's that really weird track about something about a wolf or something.
I don't know.
I don't remember, but anyway, Paradise by the Dashboard Light is really great and kind of like a take on 50s style sing along stuff. And then I love how it has like these different parts of the song a la Band on the Run kind of style where it's changing styles a bit. And that whole thing with the baseball sexual innuendo, that's classic stuff, man. You gotta love it. And yeah, him going back and forth with the girl, I'm gonna love you forever, and let me sleep on it, and all that whole thing.
Yeah, so
Absolutely
great.
classic.
Let me sleep on it, and he's just like.
Yeah.
And also, I just have to say, I mean, say what you will about the man's beliefs and what happened to. I mean, one great vocalist. This dude could.
Oh, yeah.
I definitely a better singer than Springsteen. I'll give him that. But too bad what happened to him. And but obviously, he never quite captured the success that he did with this album. But this remains to be the standout in his catalog. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. I'll let you decide. But it's certainly an iconic record in its own right. I'd probably put it probably somewhere in the last episode. But I do think it's a good choice. I don't mind it being on the list, just not over some other albums,
Yeah, I'm not mad at it being on here, but I think it should be lower for sure.
Definitely lower than Boston.
Yeah, that too. So what the hell, guys? No. But anyway, so now at number 54.
Can't Buy a Thrill, the debut studio album by Steely Dan, the duo consisting of Walter Becker and Donald Fagen. This is really such an iconic record. And I hadn't really gotten into Steely Dan at this point, but I have to thank Alex Primo for introducing this album to me, because this Steely Dan is a band that I don't quite love, but I think is undeniably great. And this album is really the main reason. I think that this is one of the strongest debut studio albums, probably like top 15 or so studio albums or debut albums of all time. And it's just the way they combined jazz and rock and really created these really, really tight song structures with these really, really tight chord progressions that were not only just incredibly complex, but extremely catchy right out of the gate with Do It Again, one of the songs that I had already heard so many times, and I'm almost sick of hearing when I at my last job. They just played these songs over and over on the station like every single day. But it's
Yeah.
undeniably got that and go back, Jack, and do
Do
it
it again.
again.
Yeah.
Wheel turning around
And
and
that
round. I
electric
mean,
keyboard, man, that's such a cool sound that they have on there.
oh, dude,
Yeah.
unquestionably. And also, if we're talking about Steely Dan, we just have to talk about the studio professionalism on here, because this is like audio file quality right here. And
Mhm.
I am so grateful to actually have found this on vinyl, because
Mm.
these printings, besides Asia, they're really, really hard to come by. And I was at this when I went to see Billy Joel, I was at this record shop in Buffalo and I saw it. And
Mm.
I'm like, there's no way I'm actually seeing this right now. And I had to pick it up because it was only like $15 or something for this great of an album. And,
Yeah.
and yet again, I mean, right after that, you get Dirty Work, which had featured David Palmer on lead vocals, who they thought was going to be their vocalist. But obviously, they kicked him out of the band, and Donald Fagen became the primary voice, which honestly, like, I think was a better choice because his voice just suits their sound. You
Mhm.
know, like every time you hear Steely Dan, you hear Donald Fagen's voice. It's just you can't really remove the two.
Right.
But Dirty Work is just beautiful. The synths on this thing are just insane and just so catchy. That chorus, I'm a fool to do your dirty work. Oh yeah, and just the
Yeah.
horns on it, incredible, man. But really some underrated tracks on here, especially Midnight Cruiser, which could have been a hit on its own right. I'm kind of shocked that one doesn't get more airplay. It's one of my absolute favorite songs on the entire album. And just the way these song structures are very, they kind of have this cyclical structure to them, and the lyrics are very cryptic, but they're also very, very engaging at the same time. You want to hear it, and I think it's because musically it's just so great. And of course, I mean, I have to mention the best song on here, I think, even though I've heard it so many times, Reelin' in the Years,
Mhm.
which features Elliot Randall, which I believe Jimmy Page said his guitar solo on this is the greatest guitar solo of all time, and
Mm.
and I certainly wouldn't argue that it's up there at the very least. But I just love the way they play musically with the lyrics, especially when they're like that chord ascension,
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
goes into major and then it switches into minor, and then
Right.
it descends and it goes back into major, and it just crazy. And then of course you get, are you reeling in the years?
Yeah. How can you not love that? Yeah.
Forever? I mean,
Yeah.
it's just amazing. Probably Steely Dan's best song if I had to throw
Mhm.
one out there.
Yeah.
But absolute
That and Do It
classic.
Again, I think, are probably, top
And,
two right there. I
dude,
mean,
and Dirty Work, I think could be up there too. Even Midnight
mhm.
Cruiser, which obviously I said was underrated, but that would be
Right.
up there for me.
Yeah.
And even like Turn That Heartbeat Over Again is probably one of the most complex songs on here, lyrically and musically. And I just think such a great way to close. I mean, what a phenomenal and I think groundbreaking LP.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not that big on Steely Dan. I'm gonna be honest. I don't know why that like they just haven't really hit it for me yet. And I've only listened to like a handful of their albums or less, I guess, but nothing has really just grabbed me by the throat, and said like you must love Steely Dan.
Yeah,
But
me neither.
maybe I'll get there eventually. But I definitely for just the two big hits, I see why it's on the list, and I'm not upset with it. I probably wouldn't put it that high, even though we're still in the lower tier right now. But yeah, good stuff, guys.
I think I'd put it a little bit higher, personally, but
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's at a decent spot. I just, man, I'm telling you, like, I feel the same way where they haven't like grabbed me by the throat and said, you must
Mhm.
love this band, because I just think some of their lyricism's a bit alienating, especially
Yeah.
when they go on and they go a little bit more experimental. Some of the songs kind of lose me, but I
Sure.
think this is the one where they really just honed in on the craft. I mean, not that they hadn't afterwards, but this one just features their most catchy songs while still being incredibly complex, remaining
I feel like
completely.
there's still time because like I didn't really get into Fleetwood Mac until I hit 40. So maybe when I
Uh-huh.
hit 50, I'll dig Steely Dan. Maybe that's what it
It,
is. Like,
it's very much a dad rock vibe.
yeah, exactly.
There's no question about very
Yeah,
intellectual sort of, so I
right.
get it. It could hit for you at some time down the line, and I
I,
hope it does, especially this album.
yeah, cool. It
I
could
think it's their
happen.
best. So
Well, good deal. Well, now at number 53, T for the Tillerman by Cat Stevens, aka Yusuf Islam. Now, man, this is such a great album, and I guess you would call it a folk rock record. But I feel like that might even box it in a little too much because there's just so much magic on this record, from the opening track of Where Did the Children Play, which has such a great message of, that still very much feels relevant today, of,
prophetic, even.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
big time, and then you've got Wild World, probably his greatest song. I mean, guitar wise, that chord progression is just so awesome. And ooh, baby, baby, it's a
Baby, it's a
wild
wild.
world. I mean, come on, you
Yeah.
gotta love it. And then of course, I'm skipping around here, but Father and Son, probably his greatest ballad of all time. Very possibly. You've got Miles from Nowhere, a great rocker, On the Road to Find Out. It feels like there's so much like spiritual yearning on this album. And that was a lot of what made Cat, I think, stand out above the pack of some of the other folk rockers of that era, is that he was always searching. And I'm happy to see that it seems like he's finally found his spiritual peace in some form. But man, the joy of the adventure, taking it with him on this album, is just wonderful. I love this. I think it should be higher.
I think I'm okay with it being at this spot, but I think regardless, I think we agree on basically everything else. I mean, this album's an absolute classic, and
Hmm.
I just absolutely adore this album, and really I think easily his best. Just and as you said, from that opening track, just so beautiful,
Hmm.
and really just such a great song. Definitely a step, uh leaps and bounds better lyrically than any of his previous stuff, but obviously, having tuberculosis and almost succumbing to it, he had a lot of time to do a lot of soul searching in that
Mm.
period, and to become a lot more self-reflexive in about his life, and certainly in his songs, which you definitely hear in Wild World. And I wouldn't quite say it's his best song, but it's unquestionably one of his best, especially that hook. La 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 la
La,
la
la.
la la la.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh yeah.
it's just so catchy. You can't help it. Who doesn't love that song?
Exactly.
And I heard it so many times that going in the album I knew it, but I don't
Hmm.
think I ever heard his version of it. So it was really great when I finally got to hear him. Like, this song's amazing.
Yeah.
But even so, I mean, as you said, Miles from Nowhere, absolute class, and just the instrumentation on that song, especially with the brass section that kind of like culminates in the middle, so great.
Hmm.
But other great songs on here too, like Longer Boats is like a dip in the gospel.
Mm.
With his
Hmm.
vocals, there's a lot of reverb on there, and it feels like more gigantic than
Yeah.
it probably was. And just such a catchy track. That longer boats are coming to
Coming to
win
win
us,
us. Yeah.
coming to win us.
So
I mean,
great.
it's just so great. And
And
Into
nobody
White,
sounds like him, man. His
right?
vocals, I like, he's so singular. And yeah, Into White, man. Beautiful
Oh,
song.
just and it's like the lyricism doesn't make any sense, but the
Right.
guitar playing is just so complex, and just gorgeous when he says Into White, and then you just hear that
Yeah.
acoustic guitar just floating
And the
off into
acoustic
space.
bass
Oh,
throughout the album sounds so good. The production is really strong on this album.
really, I mean, that is no question about it. And I will say, and also On the Road to Find Out is like
Mm.
a classic, hero's journey, but it feels very soul searching at the same time. As you were
Hmm.
saying,
Yeah.
you see that spirituality pour into every single pour of these songs.
Yeah, and even the
But
songs that aren't, necessarily on that level of like deepness, like Hard-Headed Woman. I really appreciate that song as well. I can even relate to it in some ways, but looking for a hard-headed woman. It's so cool, man. He's really got a knack for writing relatable songs, catchy songs, and just brilliantly beautiful songs. I know you want to talk about Father and Son a little bit because,
Oh
oh
man,
my
because
God.
I think that is unquestionably his best song, and
Hmm.
just the way he adopts that persona of the father singing the
Hmm.
lower register. It's not time to make a change, just relax,
Relax,
take it
get
easy. and
easy.
then and then you
Yeah.
get a chorus on that when he just explodes on, how can
Yeah.
I try to explain? I mean, it
Yeah.
just, especially on the last when he's like saying all the times that I've cried, keeping all the things I knew inside. It's hard, but it's harder to
To
ignore, man.
ignore it.
Oh
Oh
my
man.
goodness, just
Yeah.
some of the greatest lyrics I've ever heard, and one of the most
Hmm.
beautiful underplayed melodies I've ever heard in my entire life. It just sticks with you for a lifetime, and
Yeah.
used so beautifully in Guardians of the Galaxy
Mm.
Volume 2. I just think the best scene in that movie, and that's when I knew, I was like, oh my goodness, I got to listen to this Cat Stevens guy.
Yeah.
And this album didn't disappoint. This is a singer-songwriter classic, and as I said, definitely his best album. I don't know like how you could even top. Well, if it maybe it was a different artist, I think maybe could have topped it. But this is such a high bar
Yeah.
for most artists, and yeah, I mean, just absolutely adore this record.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, Teaser and the Firecat is kind of close to it in quality, but this definitely is his best. But yeah, great pick, guys. So now at number 52.
Jesus died for somebody's sins, but not mine.
Horses, the debut album by Patti Smith. Oh, what a seminal record. I mean, this is just from the opening track, Gloria in Excelsis Deo, which is not the Christmas song, obviously, but the way, just that really, that statement, that manifesto, Jesus died for somebody's sins, but not mine. Taking some personal accountability for your own actions. That's when you knew nothing was ever going to be the same again after Patti Smith hit the New York scene in 1975 with this album. And of course, I think obviously the album cover gives a lot of credence to kind of the androgynous nature of the song. Where he's talking about this girl, walking down, ooh, she looks so good, like doing that
Yeah.
really like crazy thing with her voice, which, I mean, nobody sounds like her, obviously, but then just how it breaks out into that punk rock anthem with that make it mine, and how they meld that this poem that she wrote with them's Gloria, and just, I mean, just incredible. I think that is one of the greatest. I think that's the greatest punk song of all time. I just think it's an absolute masterpiece. And then you follow it up with songs like Redondo Beach, which is just so kind of hypnotic in its reggae rhythms and grooves, but it's really, really dark underneath the surface, and also really groundbreaking, because I don't think at this point punk had really delved into the reggae side of things, which obviously became so prevalent with punk later in the 70s and post-punk, obviously, as we've seen with the Clash and the Police. But really, this might have been one of the first instances where those two genres were fused together.
Hmm.
And then Birdland is just like this she adapted this poem about this guy grieving the death of his father, and made it such a bold and an abstract statement, kind of like this, this abstract poetry, but I think, as opposed to some other stuff from other band, it's such a powerful statement. The musical cacophony of sounds and stuff like Free Money, talking about how she would love to have all the money in the world, talking about how she grew up poor, and songs like Kimberly, which talking about the birth of her sister, is just so beautiful. The way she describes it, I've never heard anything quite as poignant to someone describing such a significant event as that so beautifully. And of course, I also have to mention Land, which features horses, where she's just saying horses, horses. She's just screaming it over and over again, and she throws in "Do the Watusi," and references the Fats Domino, and then like cutting
Yeah.
like your throat, or I mean, it is bizarre stuff, and obviously you see the influence. This is, I think, this period in time where the Velvet Underground really started influencing all these different artists, and you started to see that momentum and that influence bubble underneath the surface. And I just think that this is unquestionably the album that broke the avant-garde out into the mainstream, and really punk, especially women in rock. I mean, Patti Smith is such a trailblazer, and that's why I absolutely adore this record. Just the audacity of it, the lyricism. I mean, this is one album that I had to listen to it 3 times the first time I heard it, because I saw how high it was on the Rolling Stone list. I'm like, why haven't I heard this? This is a debut album. This should, I should have listened to this by now. But I was so happy when I did, because this is, I think, the best punk record of all time. And I think one of the only punk records I don't find overrated. But you might have something else to say about
You
it.
could probably see in my eyes there from your statement. Yeah, I would not call this. I don't agree with your assessment that it's the best punk album of all time. And now that you mentioned it being so high on Rolling Stone's list, I do think this is overrated. And honestly, like, probably the only album on this whole list that I could easily say I could do without. But everything that you said is true. The influence. I mean, she's influenced countless artists, REM included, as you said, The Clash. Makes perfect sense too, as it being one of the first to do the whole reggae fusion. And I see why you love it, especially with it being influenced so much by Velvet Underground. But yeah, man, I've tried to get into this a few times, and I don't know. I guess the avant-garde just is too much for Johnny to dig it.
I guess it is, but I'll tell you this. I mean, there's certainly stuff that I don't necessarily, I think is really, really blown out and just absolute nonsense. Like her next album, I don't like at all.
Yeah.
But this one I think really was such a definitive statement. It had a lot of depth to it, and I mean, as long as you can admit, I mean, it certainly is
I don't hate it. Like,
right.
I'll say that.
Regardless, I mean, it is deserving a spot on this list just of how influential it is. And
Sure.
take what I said about Can't Buy a Thrill and amplify it a few times, because this is top 10 debut albums of all time for me. This is right near the top, and I think, obviously, based on what you said, I understand why it's this low on the list. I would put it certainly higher, but I will take it at the spot that it's at right now.
All right. Well, fine. Well, now at number 51.
Darkness on the Edge of Town by the boss himself, Mr. Bruce Springsteen. The first appearance of Bruce Springsteen on this list. Maybe we'll see him again. We'll see. But this one, yeah, this is probably actually my second favorite Bruce Springsteen album, and my second favorite Bruce Springsteen album from the 70s. I've always jumped around with his discography all over the place with what I like more. But I think I've kind of come to the conclusion that this is my definite second favorite, because this really defined the heartland rock that Springsteen became known for in the 70s, especially with the opening track, Badlands, which obviously he drew inspiration from the Terrence Malick film of the same name, but just that hook, Badlands, ain't gonna live in it. It's just, it's just so great. And of course, there's so many great tracks on here. Obviously, Something in the Night, I believe, I don't know if that's the same song that Patti Smith wrote with Bruce Springsteen, because I only see it's credited to Bruce here. But yeah, Candy's Room is another great track. I love it here. Racing in the Street, which I know you're a big fan of. It's almost a 7-minute opus about just finding redemption in drag racing in the night after working your 9 to 5. Just brilliant track. And of course, there's really, the title is very apt, Darkness on the Edge of Town, because this was certainly the darkest Springsteen, because obviously, like Greetings from Asbury Park and The Wild, the Innocent, East Street Shuffle, and Born to Run are all very jubilant, very youthful, but this is where he really gets down to the nitty gritty, especially on songs like Factory, which is just one of the darkest songs he ever wrote. But man, I tell you, like, just the highlights of Prove It All Night is yet again another classic rock staple.
Mhm.
The title track, yet again, I was talking about that darkness. He even says it in the title, there's a darkness on the edge of town.
Yeah.
But to me, I think the absolute standout, and I think probably like top 3 Springsteen songs of all time, The Promised Land is like the definitive song about the blue collared worker just fed up with, you know, just the monotony of his life, wanting to drive out on the highway,
Mhm.
bring himself to somewhere else where he can escape all of the mundaneness of his downtrodden life. And I mean, just that chorus, um yes, I believe in the promised land. He just proclaims so heavily, and some of his best lyrics too, like take a knife, like that pre-chorus is just amazing, and just the lyrical depth on here. I mean, there's no question that Springsteen is one of the greatest lyricists ever, and I just think thematically this is probably his strongest album too. I mean, I just think some of the production on it kind of drowns his vocals, especially on Adam Raised a Cain, which
Mm.
yet again is one of the hardest songs Springsteen has ever rocked to. I
Great
think
rocker, man. That's actually
absolutely.
probably my favorite track on the album, just because
Wow.
it really took me off guard, even though like I know Bruce can rock hard with the best of them, but that took me by surprise because I hadn't listened to this album in full until recently. And um that album, like, it hits hard, man. And dude, the guitar work on it is fantastic. And Bruce, when he's like really into it, Adam Raised a Cain, it's like, it's
Yeah,
so
man.
great.
And I mean, especially
Yeah.
between him and Van Zandt, I mean,
Yeah,
they're both great on here, and
absolutely.
especially talk about his, like, Springsteen does that guitar solo on The Promised Land, and I just
Mhm.
think that's probably his finest hour as a guitarist.
Yeah,
Just
he's really
amazing.
underrated as a guitarist, man. But yeah, I think, all the songs you mentioned, I mean, there's so much strong songwriting on here. I'd put it definitely in my top 5 Springsteen albums. Candy's Room, great melody on the piano and vocally. And yeah, Racing in the Street is definitely one of my favorites as well. But yeah, man, Bruce coming on the scene here in the late 70s. And then, of course, superstardom would follow in the 80s and beyond. But yeah, this is turning out to be such a great list, guys. I mean, the diversity thus far, already there's some things that we think should be higher, of course. And
I disagree
yeah,
entirely.
absolutely, it's bound to happen. But yeah, I'm loving it. I think from here it's just going to keep getting better, I'm sure.
Absolutely, yeah, guy. I mean, really, I'm just having so much fun already, and to think that there's even more great albums to talk about coming up next. So, like,
50
what's going to make
more.
the list? Who
Yeah.
knows? Besides us, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So guys, thank you again for voting and for participating just in general. We love your comments always. And guys, please, if you have not subscribed to Nathaniel's channel yet, please do, because obviously we're doing every other episode on each other's channels, but this guy has so much great content, also album reviews, movie reviews, and so much more. So yeah, thank you for watching.
Well, and thank you, John, for the kind words. And yeah, guys, make sure to check out my ranking of all the Pixar films. I'm either going to put
Mm.
it up today or the next day, somewhere within that time frame. But you're going to not want to miss that one. So once again, thanks for having me on here, John. Obviously doing this collaboration, and yeah, can't wait for the next episode.
We will see you guys there. Peace out.
I know I have to go.